So in part 1, I showed that Matthew of the Bible is actually Maat, the ancient goddess who judged before one passed over to the underworld. And of course, Matthew has the symbol of the scales because he was a tax collector, thus the symbol of Maat, who judges. Now, of course, when we look up judgment for the Bible, you're going to come up with the Gospel of Matthew. So that's why we have the famous saying of "Judge not, lest ye be judged." In other words, don't judge others or you will be judged. So remember I told you about the separation of the 1 and the 7, which is the balancing scales of the bi-seasons. And that's exactly why this famous judgment from Matthew is Matthew 7:1. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Again, showing the connection between Maat, Matthew, and judgment, truth, and justice. So perhaps now you will understand why the U.S. Department of Justice actually began on July 1st. Remember the July with the Statue of Liberty? Now we have the July 1st. And what is July 1st? July 1st is 7/1.
Matthew, come.
Follow me, he told them. And Matthew got up and followed him.
So why do you think Jesus keeps saying, "Follow me"? You see, because they are following the Son of God. Thus, the 12 disciples, or the 12 houses of the zodiac, have to follow the Son of God on the Son's journey. Thus, the ancients believed that the sun took steps across the sky because they thought the sun circled the earth. So this is why Jesus, the Son of God, is saying, "Follow me. Follow me throughout the houses of the zodiac on my journey throughout the seasons of the year." Because, like I've explained, Jesus is the character of nature. He is the traveling fool. He is the jester that represents the anthropomorphic character of nature. Thus, the Son of God is our risen Savior. And, of course, the 12 disciples follow him. But what is a disciple? Like I explained earlier about the truth of what an evangelist is, the even, well, the truth about the disciple tells the same exact story. A disciple is the dis, okay? It means to disassemble. Thus, the meaning of dis means apart, to separate. Thus, the very meaning of what a disciple is, or what the 12 characters of the Bible are. They are the 12 houses of the zodiac, or the 12 animals, which a human is an animal, so it's all the same really, but it's just the meat, the flesh of the zodiac, or the zoo animal wheel that represents life itself throughout the seasons. Thus, Jesus, who is the character of nature, has 12 followers that follow him throughout the season of the year. So remember the 7 and the 1, thus the heart and the feather that are weighed. Okay, well, that's Maat, that's Matthew, and that's Jesus. So this is why this picture right here of Jesus that's showing you the red and the white, which is the balancing of the 2 seasons, the balancing scales, and Jesus is the truth, and the heart. It's letting you know that that is the symbol of the scales of Matthew. That is the scales of nature. That is the cross. Thus, Matthew's talking about the cross. So this picture of Jesus is showing you the attributes and the symbolism of the heart, the balancing scales of truth and justice. So again, the disciple is just a dissection, a cutting, a slice, okay? Thus the 12 followers, or the 12 pieces of the pie, make up the disciples. Like I said, that's the meaning of the zodiac, the zodiac, the diac. That is dissected in two. and thus it is disassembled. Thus, the symbol of the cross is the symbol of the zodiac that has been cut into the bi-seasonal cut of the dia. So all of the dissected sections of the zodiac are all inside of the mansion of God. Thus, in my Father's house are many mansions. Thus, there are many houses within one mansion. Thus, the reason that Jesus is born in a stable or a manger, because those are animal houses of the zodiac wheel. So again, we find it where Jesus is from. Where's Jesus from? He's from Galilee. Well, what does Galilee mean? Galilee means, in Hebrew, the district. Okay, once again, the D-I-S. And notice how they tell us that the etymology of district is the restraining of offenders, an area of jurisdiction. So the Judaic Hebrew religion and Christianity is based entirely upon the calendar of the sun and the moon. And of course, the Hebrew day actually begins when the sun sets into the underworld, and the nighttime begins. So like I've explained many times, Jesus is the traveling fool. He is the character of nature. He's the jester, the joker, the two-faced liar, because he represents the character or the green man of nature. So Yeshua, or Jesus, is the Son of God who is traveling through the 12 houses of the zodiac wheel. And that's exactly why Jesus comes to be judged himself. And of course, Jesus wears the symbolism of the blindfold, exactly like the goddess of truth and justice. Thus the character of nature playing his role. Thus the Freemasonic order initiate must also be blindfolded, thus hoodwinked. Thus the cord that binds, exactly like the umbilical cord. Thus this is a ritual of rebirth, thus going from darkness to light, the enlightenment, the bipolar of black and white. So this is exactly why Jesus, the Son of Man, says that he is the gateway, he is the doorway, which of course is Aries the ram and the baby lamb. So in life we spend half of it growing until we reach the peak where we start to grow older. Just like in real life, we actually spend half of our life sleeping or in the death mode, and we spend the other half of life living. The cycles of life and death. And of course, this is why we mourn after the death of the night, in the morning. And of course, that's when we are resurrected and we rise from the dead. So now you'll understand why Jesus goes and descends down the rabbit hole to the underworld. Now, I have shown the devil's hole or the rabbit hole many times in my videos, so you'll understand this symbolism that Jesus too must also go down the rabbit hole and go to the underworld, because that's what characters that represent nature do. So the descent to the underworld is an ancient mythological story that goes back thousands of years before the Bible. From the ancient stories of the Epic of Gilgamesh to the stories of Persephone or Persephone. Hades abducts Persephone and takes her to the underworld, and her mother, Demeter, works out a deal where she can be 6 months in the underworld and 6 months in the overworld. Because she searched all night and could not find Persephone, so she asked Helios for help in the morning when the sun rose, because Helios was the sun god. Helios, the Greek sun god, was the son of one of the 12 Titan gods known as Hyperion. Hyperion was known as the Most High Sun God. And of course we see the same symbolism with Apollo, the sun god. Notice how he is chained, thus his liberties are taken away. So remember when I was telling you about how the Statue of Liberty, remember I showed you the chains on the Statue of Liberty, and of course they both have the same type of rays on their heads? Breaking the chains that bind you is symbolic of nature breaking the chains of the cycles that bind it, which is why we have the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the chains of the season change. So the symbolism of the chain can be found all around us, from mythological stories to Hollywood and religion as well. So that's why we saw that Loki was chained up. The same that we saw with the ancient mythological story of Prometheus, who was chained. And of course, the famous chained story of Andromeda, Superman, Iron Man, the Hulk, and the list goes on and on. So the chains that bind us and the breaking of them is symbolic of life and change, thus the seasonal change of the overworld and the underworld. Thus the seasonal change is the chain of the sun. Thus the story of Samson, the 2 pillars, and the chains that he breaks, the pillars that hold up the universe, the moon and the sun that represent the day and the night, the winter and the summer. So both the sun and the moon are represented by ascending high upon a pillar, but then they fall and go to the underworld, so therefore the pillar breaks. Thus, the broken pillar. So just like the story of the Samson son, we have the 12 labors of Hercules, and of course they have the same symbolism of the 2 pillars and him being chained up and breaking the chains and the pillars. Notice the broken pillar in Hercules 2014. The story of Hercules that goes through his 12 labors, or the 12 houses of the zodiac, which is why he goes down the rabbit hole to the underworld and through the houses of the zodiac to the overworld. Thus he plays the anthropomorphic character of the Lion Man, which is the Sun Man. And would you believe it was released in July, the 7th month, the 7 and the 1? So this is why Christianity has the same symbolism. The lion, the lamb, and the cross. It represents the zodiac, thus the sun in the house of Aries, which is why the picture of Jesus, the Son of God, is pictured with the lamb and the lion. So like I said, we find the symbolism of the chained one and the pillars all throughout history to this very day. So you see, that's why we see the same story in Jesus, who is the traveling fool. He is the Son of God, traveling through the houses of the zodiac. Thus Jesus gives balance to the zodiac. So like I said, the Bible is all about the buy or the die, the divide or the balance of the two. And these twin pillars make up the portal or the gateway. So again, the character of Jesus, the character of nature, represents the gateway, the portal. He represents the, going down to hell, going down the rabbit hole. He represents the pillar. And of course, he is the one who is chained to the pillar. So I've explained all this in my previous videos about how the character of nature, Jesus, is just another anthropomorphic character that represents the ancient harvest rituals. Thus, the whole life cycle of Jesus is playing that character that represents nature. So of course, that's why Jesus, the Son of God, represents the number 7, like I've explained. And of course, the number 7 is all about the book of Revelations as well, which is all about the sun god. Thus, the 7 spikes on the Statue of Liberty and the 7 gates that Inanna had to go through in her descent to the underworld. Thus, the 7th day, God rested because the balance of 7 is at a time when things are at rest. And of course, the 7 and 1 pillar is held and bound by the chain.